the controlling class is not interested in having people understand this because, first of all, this leads to the causal factors, the understanding of the causal factors about why humanity is in the current conditions that we're in. Many people will have no answer for that. They don't understand the causal factors.
Tonight on History So It Doesn't Repeat.
Welcome back to History So It Doesn't Repeat. Tonight we have a very special topical debate between Tom Willcutts of Hartford, Connecticut. He's a local attorney, and the illustrious Larken Rose here on Skype for the first time in the studio. Welcome, Larken. Welcome, Tom.
Stopped using dollars. Would that or would that not mean an immediate permanent end to the Federal Reserve and the international banking cartel?
No. Absolutely.
What would they do if nobody used their dollars? How would they get any power, any money? Nobody borrows it. Nobody trades with it.
He's saying it's the plug to their power. What happens if you pull their plug?
If everyone understood and traded with silver starting tomorrow and nobody would accept dollars for anything, what happens to the IMF and the Federal Reserve and the international bankers and all that?
The banking, the idea that, look, we're not going to solve the problems with currency and the history of banking in this debate.
But you're noticing that there's a connection between government, and if you took away government, there would still be this power trying to have a harness over human resources. So I think we're really getting to the point where this debate's getting interesting. Now,
you'd still have people trying deception, but if they don't have government with the ability to force it on people and people feeling obligated to obey the law, fraud can only go so far. Because if people notice it, not only do they say, we're not playing your game, they also say, we're coming to get everything you have. And there won't be cops, and there won't be a military, and there won't be the giant authoritarian monster backing up the international bankers. Okay. There will be a bunch of scared crooks running for the hills.
No, look, that's not, Larken. You haven't come up with a design of an anarchist system that would be in place for government. Am I correct about that?
You talk as a system. Anarchy is not a system. It is a lack of a ruling class.
All right. Well,
now there's ways to organize without a ruling class, but anarchy isn't a system. It's like,
it's autonomy.
Just like,
it's a bunch of individuals having the autonomy to make decisions for themselves.
Let's just use a simple example, Larken. All right. So let's say that you enter in a stateless society, right? You enter into a contract. So you can still do contracts, right? In the anarchist volunteerist society.
You can make agreement, yeah.
Okay. So let's say a lot of money's at stake. In fact, it's your accumulated life savings over 4 decades. Okay. But the person breaks the contract and now you need to enforce it. How are you going to do that?
Either we aren't, or we do it with people with guns.
Okay.
The assumption, it sounds like the assumption behind the question is that government is needed to enforce things. The only thing, like the right of self-defense, which includes what you're talking about, because what you're talking about is fraud. It's theft. It's a form of theft. It's like if I go into a store and say, I'll give you $20 for that sandwich, and he hands me the sandwich and I run away and don't give him the $20, that's theft. It's the same thing as if somebody enters a contract, an agreement, and then doesn't do their side of it. They stole whatever they got from the other guy. And force is justified without special authority, without government, without legislation. Formally say, look, you did this, and society knows you did this, and we would like to give you a chance to give it back voluntarily, but there's a bunch of us that know what you did. And in fact, if you want to have your say, you can even do that. So I'm not saying you just get a club and go hit the guy over the head. There's lots of ways to make it more formal and make it more peaceful and give more opportunities to not have it turn into forcible combat. None of that requires government. The only thing that requires government is when you're pretending to have a right to do something that other people don't have the right to do. Because self-defense and getting your stuff back, whether people have the ability to do it or not on their own, they have the right to do it, which means it's perfectly legitimate and consistent to hire somebody else to protect your house, to hire somebody else to go get your car back from the guy who stole it. So none of that requires like making up rights out of thin air. None of it requires legislation. None of it requires authority. Now, a lot of people say, well, what if this bad thing happens without a stateless society? I'm not saying, and I don't know any anarchists who's saying without a stateless, without a government, nothing bad would ever happen. But there's nothing in the world that can guarantee nothing bad will ever happen or bad guys won't ever get away with stuff. There is, however, one thing that will absolutely 100% guarantee that thieves and bad guys will win, and that's government. Because by its very nature, it's a beast that initiates violence. And so every government in the world has stolen in the name of taxation, whereas not every individual person has stolen. A minority of people now steal. But every single government in the history of the world commits extortion. A thing I was trying to get to before that we went off track is I was hoping you would that we could start with the model of what you want government to be. Let's say lots of people who agree exactly with you form a Congress or a Parliament or whatever organization you want it to be, and they form the exact one that you want. I was hoping you could give sort of an overview of what that looks like, and then let me ask a few questions about it.
Sure. I had some follow-up questions on that contrary example, but we were at this stage earlier, so we can go back to it. Because what I had said earlier was that after a couple hundred years experience with the American government design and the compromises that were made and so forth, I would have some improvements, okay? One of those improvements is there wouldn't be coercive taxation. The IRS and the income tax did not exist for over 100 years in the U.S. government, right?
Wrong.
Right.
1861 was the first federal income tax.
Okay.
Yes. Abraham Lincoln. Then it died. There was a gap, and then in 1894, the Supreme Court threw it out. It came back in 1950.
So you're saying it?
There were 100 years without it.
Okay. But my point is, it is.
Yeah, there was a long time.
I've seen I don't know if Ludwig von Mises was the first one who wrote that government has to have taxation and therefore has to steal, and this is absolutely a fundamental necessary feature of government. It's simply not the case. I mean, first of all, you don't need coercive taxation, okay? And I wouldn't have it.
Okay.
I mean, you could, I might charge fees for some government services, but there's a different way to fund government. There's a couple different ways to do it, but to answer your question, I wouldn't have that. So I would not have victimless crimes, okay? I would not have a standing army. I would have a militia on the Swiss system where citizens would be encouraged to have military-grade weapons and go through training and be available to defend the country. Okay, so
sounds very anarchist. So
no,
far.
It's I would have a constitution that would include something similar to the Bill of Rights. I would in the Constitution I would define how I would fund the government. I would also define what the government can the services it can be involved in and what it can spend funds on.
How's it get funds?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay,
No. Let's. The punishment would primarily be restitution in nature and maybe fines as well. I would not have prisons. If the criminal activity reached the point of which the person is deemed dangerous, cannot be a productive member of society, would kick them out, would exile them. That would be the ultimate punishment. Citizenship would not be required. I mean, a good government, the problem it's going to have is keeping people, keeping their numbers limited, not having to wall people in like they did in East Berlin. Okay, that's why America had such an immigration for so many years, because people competitively choosing what they saw as a superior system in terms of things like liberty and opportunity and economic opportunity. Say what you want, it did have improvements.
Europe was high pressure, and they created a low pressure system in America to draw the population in.
Yeah, and we created a lot of wealth. While we
I would set up there would be a judiciary. Okay, the judges would not be elected like they are in some places. I have sort of details for how the court system would work. I would use the common law. I would have some.
So we can post a whole summary of this along with the video of the debate, and people, maybe it spawns a second debate or some more feedback because.
Right.
Okay,
no, that's about covered.
All right, so if that covers it, let's let Larken respond here.
A lot of what you just said were powers that it wouldn't have, all of which I agree with. Anything you want government to not do, I'm in agreement. Like no coercive taxation, no attacking people for victimless
no monopoly
crimes,
on currency either, by the way. Okay. Actually,
Okay,
I can do it real quick. You asked me what the currency is. I'm sorry.
You're going to interrupt the guy who can't see you.
No,
That's all I'm saying.
No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking, Larken, you're familiar with Bitcoin, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Bitcoin is a currency that's created without taxation, right? Okay.
Right.
In fact, it's created by people, I don't fully understand it, but people do some tasks to create it, and they have some value, right? These tasks you perform, there's some sort of accounting or something like that.
It's not so much value. It's a computer algorithm. I don't know all the details, but I know a little bit about it. Basically, it's called bit mining. A computer sits there and thinks, and it's a way, I don't understand how it magically does that, but it's a way to very carefully limit the supply, which is crucial, while making new currency to keep up with the expanding
exactly.
use.
And that
so it doesn't, it's a nothing based currency, which was my first thing to go, whoa. But I think there are reasons it's actually
right.
Good
This is precisely what a government could do, except instead of a useless mining activity, the currency comes into existence to do the things you want the government to do. If the people want a road built, the currency is created for that, just like the Bitcoin is created, and it gets paid to people. They're producing something of value, and you can control just in the same way. You can control its levels in a sensible way so that you're not, you don't got runaway inflation, so forth, and you don't have taxes. And there will be some services that the government supply, like, if you want to use the government court system, typically they have exceptions if you're poor. But if you're not, you pay something so that the currency would be accepted for that. But otherwise, I would not have a monopoly on currencies. You want to trade silver, you want to trade gold, you want to trade euros, anything else. So there's the currency side. Okay.
Is there anything your government, like you listed a bunch of things it's not allowed to do, and I agree with everything you said it's not allowed to do. What power would it actually have? Like, would it have a monopoly on anything? Suppose you're there and you have your currency system and your court system and this, that, and the other thing, and I and a bunch of other people say, that's nice, and we're not going to interfere.
Well, let me ask you a question.
But we prefer these arbiters and we prefer this currency.
Well, let me ask you.
Does it have any power to, does it have monopoly on
What
anything?
do you think the current government has monopoly on?
Everything. Whatever it wants to make up.
Well, you tell me the ones that bother you and I'll tell you whether, look, in our current government
has monopoly on being our government right now.
Okay.
On violently extorting 100 million people. I'm sure we can agree on lots of things it shouldn't be doing. I'm asking your ideal government, what does it have a monopoly on anything, or can I completely ignore it? Can I use my own, if I and my neighbor have a dispute and we want to go to Bob because we both trust Bob, we don't.
By the way, you can do that right now, you realize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't.
But is there anything you're going to force me to participate in or fund or go along with in your government, or can I use my own currency and my own courts?
Okay.
Or no courts at all?
You a criminal violation. You are subject to the jurisdiction of the government courts. A crime is it really is the state's case. I mean, the victim can bring a
Is there
civil
a jury
case.
of your peers?
Yeah, sure.
Is nullification of an irrational
Absolutely.
law the first thing discussed among this jury?
Yeah, I have a jury in my system, which you would not, by the way, have in your stateless society. But go ahead. It's one of the major protections that you. Okay, that gets back to when we.
You just made that up. You can totally use juries and arbiters, and I mean the whole point of a jury trial is people want to make sure they're not punishing an innocent person, and that would still be true. I don't want to punish an innocent person, so if somebody says, "Hey, Bob stole my cow or my car or whatever it is," I don't want to say, "Let's go beat up Bob." I want to say, "Well, wait, I want to hear from Bob." And then I want to see proof that he did it before I say, yeah, we better do something nasty to Bob or shun him or whatever it is. People don't want to punish innocent people. So things like juries and innocent until proven
a jury
guilty.
is a government
those things,
creation, Larken.
it doesn't have to be.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Well, there could be a group of people, we don't have to call them a jury, in a stateless society where everyone's participating voluntarily, and it would be a group of your peers still. We just wouldn't call it a jury because according to Tom's legal definition, a jury is something created by a state. Is that correct?
Well, how do you get this jury to serve as a jury? Do you pay them for their time?
Well, if you don't force anybody to do anything,
right,
obviously, in a stateless society. But if there's a little town and somebody's accused of doing something, I could totally see the little town saying, we got to have like a hearing and bring in the guy who said he did something and ask him, not drag him in. Ask both sides to come in and speak their piece.
The town does this.
And say, is that guy denying it? And is that guy saying he did it? So that the town can hear and decide for itself what they think happened. I mean, that's the essence of a jury.
It's a group of people voluntarily together.
A group of people who live in a place. No, it doesn't need a king to be a town. It needs to be people living in close proximity.
All right, look. I haven't heard anyone explain how a jury system would work yet, but here's what most anarchists say about dispute resolution is that you would have you could contract to have an arbitration system, okay? People don't contract to have jurors. It's not a jury if you do that, I don't think, actually. They're
Well, you can call it something else, but it's the same thing. It's a bunch of people who get there and want to hear the evidence and want to decide for themselves what they think actually happened before they jump on the bandwagon to say, yeah, we got to do something about this, or say, we don't think he actually did it.
What Larken's describing is a voluntary form of solving a problem, and jury duty is a legal obligation that they, do some sort of penalty. And so I think there is another word that maybe we're not finding that would describe the voluntary type of, adjudicating a situation.
Yeah, I'll use a different word if you know one, because juries imply you have to show up or it'll be contempt of court and we put you in a cage for not showing up. There wouldn't be that.
That's what's bad about it.
Right.
Okay, so we're just I'm trying to make sure that you and Tom are on the same page.
All right, so let's get back to. I'm sorry. Did I answer your question? Your question was the monopoly. The only monopoly I can think of. All right, is that there's only one procedure for, pursuing a criminal.
Somebody commits aggression.
Right,
That's an actual crime. Okay, and here's my question about that. Because if I break into somebody's house or steal their car, I wouldn't, but I agree. Wait, this doesn't make sense because I have to be a schizo if I use myself as the example. If somebody else breaks into a house or steals a car, I agree that it's okay to use force against him to do something about that, to fix that, to try to get restitution or whatever. What you're saying, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only one group that's going to be allowed to use force against him to fix that. Is that correct?
Well, there's not only one group that can stop it,
Okay.
I mean,
like
the right of self-defense
exists. Bob steals a car.
Okay, right.
Bob steals a car. He drives it, and somebody who's wandering along says, hey, I saw your car in Bob's driveway. And so a bunch of guys go over and nicely knock on the guy's door and say, we know that's Bob's car. It's missing. He didn't give anybody permission to borrow it. What's the deal? And the guy says, You say, okay, we're taking it back. Is that permissible under
No.
your system? Really?
Right.
Who would you initiate violence against for doing that? I mean, what would your system do to the people who went over and said, "You have Bob's car, we're taking it back"? Your government's allowed to do that, but the other guys
Well,
aren't. Is that what you're saying?
if they did it, well, there's the the movie with Clint Eastwood, Hang 'em High, right?
It's been a while.
Yeah, they thought they came across. Clint Eastwood is out there. He's got this cattle, and the person whose cattle it was had just been robbed and murdered, and here he was with the guy's cattle with the brand on, and they decided themselves, using your example, that he was the thief and the murderer, and they go, what more do we need? We hang these people. Let's hang him. And
that's a good reason to have the principles of due process and a thing that you don't want me calling a jury. The thing that I would call a jury if you'd let me. And an investigation and presumption of innocence until you've actually proven guilt. That's a reason to be cautious and all that. I'm not against being cautious and being careful and finding out the truth and having investigators to really look into it and see, because sometimes people.
But Larken, your example didn't require any of those things. Your example didn't require due process. Okay.
You made up that there was some misunderstanding. That's why I said it's obviously Bob's car in the driveway. They see it. Bob didn't say anybody could take it. They go nicely knock on the guy's door. And then I asked, what is your system? Does your system allow that?
So I see
what Clint Eastwood said is, I have a bill. It was obviously this guy's cattle. And the guy has obviously been murdered. And Clint Eastwood said, no, I'm innocent. I got the bill of sale. And they go, no, this is obvious.
All right, we got mixed metaphors here. I understand.
I didn't ask about Clint Eastwood.
Well, we know.
Larken was talking about Bob. There's no contradictions with Bob's case. You cited the movie Hang 'em High, where there is a contradiction, and because they didn't have due process, they hung the wrong guy.
Okay,
right? So we got to use the same model, apples and apples.
No. Look, I understand what he's. I understand.
Investigating. That wasn't the point of the question. The point of the question is, it's obvious he did it. He doesn't even deny it. He said, "Yeah, I took Bob's car." Okay. Now, what happens to the guys who went over and said, "Well, we're taking it back"?
Well, if the guy says, "I have Bob's car," okay, is he resisting giving it back?
Well, you can do it either way.
Well,
in fact, let's do both examples. If he doesn't resist, I assume you're okay with them taking the car.
I mean, someone grabs a woman's purse and is running away with it. He's not going to object. He's not going to say no. I don't know, maybe, but would you, I'd be concerned.
That's why I'm asking about the monopoly thing. Is if somebody else goes and make justice happen, is that allowable under your government, or is your government going to forcibly stop other people from doing it? In other words, does your government claim the right to do something that other people don't have the right to do? And that's what would make it authority.
Look, you wouldn't have the right to enter someone's home to recover something, you need, Lark, it seems like your question is, due process is fine unless it's obvious, but who decides whether it's obvious? Okay. I mean, I
don't have the right to, I think it's in your house, I'm going to barge in and take it. Okay. Is there anything that the agents of your government would have the right to do that I don't have the right to do? It's just a normal person, given the exact same
one of the areas I'm not overly familiar with is citizens' arrest. I think you might, there might be a reason for having such a rule, and there would be limitations, but.
Would your government have war machines?
But I wasn't talking about arresting people. I was talking about, self-defense and that sort of thing. What I was talking about is what you call due process, the procedure by which you decide whether or not someone actually is a criminal who denies being a criminal. That would be a state function only. There's your monopoly.
There's the monopoly. And there's where you are claiming that agents of your government have rights that human beings don't. I'm just a human being. You said I don't have the right to do it. They do. I want to know where the hell they got it. How did human beings, me and several billion others, give to the agents of your government a right that none of us have? Because you just said, I don't have the right to do it, but your government agents do. How did they get rights that I don't have?
It's a law that we agree on in this state.
I can't agree to give somebody, like, I don't have the right to steal your stuff. I can't agree to give Richard the right to steal your stuff.
Who said anything about stealing my stuff?
I'm talking about delegating rights I don't have. If I don't have a right to, whatever example you want to use, go into his house, how could I and my neighbor or 3 million of my neighbors have given such a right to an agent of your government? That's the essence of authority, the idea that human beings can fabricate this ruling class that has rights that we don't. And what you are describing right up until then didn't sound like a ruling class. Now it totally is a ruling class because it claims the right to do things that mortals, according to you, don't have the right to do.
I think it's people outsourcing their own decision-making power and their authority to some other illusory group. That's where it becomes abused, because if I have to carry out retaliation for people aggressing against me, that's something. If I have to outsource it to my friends, that's another thing. But if I outsource it to guys in costumes, and then they go abuse people.
Okay, let me answer this question. Okay?
I just like to keep it burning.
What I have is, before someone can be deprived of life, well, they can't be deprived of life in my system. Before they can be deprived of liberty or property, there must be due process. Okay, and that includes a jury convicting them, which is beyond the power of the government. And all these things happen. Now, the real answer to your question is that the citizens of the state agree that this will be the process.
And those are citizens voluntarily participating?
That's where the rights come from, is the agreement that you're going to do it this way. Okay, you believe in contract rights, right?
That doesn't ever happen. Yeah, you can make an agreement, but you really think 100 million people? Are you talking about a unanimous agreement?
No.
A majority
well,
system?
Look, the Constitution. I don't have any. I'm going to create a new state. Okay, so how am I going to do
the Constitution was an agreement by 2 dozen white landowners.
There's not one Constitution. When you look up Constitution in the dictionary, it isn't the U.S. Constitution. Okay, I'm referring to my Constitution. Okay. All right. So, look, if I'm going to create a state right now, okay, sure, I'll have every citizen, agree to the Constitution if you like. And then after that,
good luck with that.
Well,
I don't agree. I already don't.
Fine,
agree.
You're not a citizen.
What happens? Do you evict me from the country?
No, not if you're no.
Okay, can I just ignore your government?
Let me ask you this: are non-citizens evicted from the United States? I mean, can a non-citizen own property in the United States?
Neither of us is condoning the U.S. empire.
Okay. Right but I'm just saying, if that is an example of bad government, and yet, these things can exist there,
I'm saying bad government is redundant. There isn't good government.
I understand.
That's
just a definition, Larken.
We finally got to the point at which we found something that your government claims the right to do and claims that I don't have the right to do it. Now, let's suppose the due process you just described, innocent until proven guilty in a trial, and you have to present evidence, and he has to have his right to say, all that good stuff, which all those ways to be cautious and make sure you don't hurt an innocent person. Right. Let's say me and the people of the town do exactly the same procedure that your government would have done about this car theft or any crime. You're saying we're not allowed to, only agents of your government can, right? Even if we did exactly the same.
That's an imaginary question, Larken. I got to tell you.
Well, it's called a hypothetical.
No,
question,
I mean, look, if you say that, people in the real world, you couldn't get everyone to agree to the Constitution, you'd have a better chance of getting everyone to agree to a constitution than what you're describing now, okay? You're describing an ad hoc group of people running a system that would protect the rights of an accused with the types of protections that we have developed over centuries: procedure, evidence, rights to gather evidence, rights to confront your accuser, rights of avoiding self-incrimination.
I know lots and lots of people who like all of those principles and don't believe in government. So I know lots of people who would exactly do that, who would make sure the guy you didn't just presume he was guilty and punish him. He had his say, and we want actual evidence, not just an accusation, and, all the basic things to make sure we're not hurting an innocent person. We're not punishing an innocent person. I know a whole lot of people who totally would do that.
If you want to say,
but I'm asking about the principle.
Fine,
is this group of people not allowed to do what the group of people over there does because they're government and they're not under your system? It's not a complicated question.
When you say they're allowed to do, so
does your government punish them if they do the same thing your government would have done?
Oh, that's a completely separate question. Okay, the question I was answering was, would people have the right to create their own judicial system and try to recreate all the protections, the procedural protections and all that, and run through all that process and do it properly and come out with a proper result? First of all, it's difficult to imagine. But second of all, the question is, do they have the right to do that? And it's like, no, and there'd be no real point to it anyway. I mean, if you're providing that service, okay, those people who you say would be doing this. So they're either following all the laws that exist to protect those rights. And how would they even know what those are? I mean, are they lawyers, the people who are doing this?
They don't care what the politicians' scribbles are. They care what the underlying principles are. They don't need to read 12 trillion law books of legalese garbage to understand you don't just punish somebody because they're assumed, because somebody made up an accusation.
Okay, Larkin.
Like the politician scribbles and the lawyer scribbles, they aren't the actual issue. They're the things that have come from
the criminal
issue.
Defendant is entitled to an attorney to represent his or her interests and the rights of the protection you would get in a court of law under procedures designed to protect their rights. So you're saying that, well, can we recreate this ourselves? And, I'm not sure I'm even imagining that. But if you want to complain that I don't give the rights to other citizens to come up with their own judicial process for protecting the criminally accused, that's fine. I'll accept that as, the criticism. Now I want to ask you about your system when you're done with that.
Okay, but yeah, the entire point, and it's not a system, but the entire point is when you have government, it always relies on the notion that there's a certain group of people that has the right to do things that other people don't have. And one example is, well, what do we do with the guy accused of stealing a car or whatever it is? And to say that this group over here, because they're agents of the government, they have the right to take him hostage and put him on trial and do this procedure, but those people over there don't have the right to do the exact same thing. And yet the likelihood that it would be exactly identical is really low. I'm talking about the principle. Is there anything the guys called government are allowed to do that other people don't have the right to do? And the answer is either yes, in which case it's insane and immoral, or no, in which case it isn't government.
Okay.
And the reason I say it's insane and immoral is if you actually imagine that we have given this group of people rights to do things that are bad if anybody else does them, you are fabricating an excuse for evil. Literally, by its nature, that is what government is. Whenever you say, those guys have special rights and powers that normal people don't have, what you're saying is, those guys are allowed to do things that are bad if I do them. In other words, government is permission to commit evil, and that is all it ever is by its very nature.
Larkin's observing
because if I have the right to do it, you don't need legislation. You don't need authority. The only thing you need government for is if you want to give someone permission to do something that's bad. I
understand your point. Your point is that my exclusive judicial system to protect the rights of criminally accused is insane and immoral. I got it.
I don't think that's it.
That's exactly what he said. That is exactly what he said.
No, what he's saying is government.
I'm saying if you say your group called government has the right to do it and other people don't have the right to do it.
Well, look, we're not talking about tax.
All right, so let me just...
Morality is different.
Let's just all take a step back here and just realize, I can't go to my neighbors. I produce value. I can't go to my neighbors and plunder their value. I don't expect them to plunder my value. You have this thing called government that's allowed to come and tax you.
No.
But it's not providing a service necessarily.
Okay. Look, I can say that Hitler's Nazi regime is a government and did all these bad things.
Sure.
So you can't say, well, here's a government that did all these bad things, so there you go. I mean,
that wouldn't be a proof. This is a proof.
No, I heard your proof, Larkin. I understand it.
The nature of government is a group that claims to have the right to do something, whether it's a little thing or everything under the sun.
I got it. Okay.
That other people can't do.
Now,
it's permission to commit evil.
Now let me put this case to your anarchist state, okay? Or your volunteer state.
It's
the absence of a system, really.
Okay,
it's a bunch of people.
You're a volunteerist society. How's that?
Autonomy.
There's people without a ruling class.
Okay,
go ahead.
So anyway, we have a contract that I had put forward before, and this contract puts your life savings in play. All right. Now the person has breached the contract. Now I hear a lot of anarchists say that one thing. Without a government court system, one of the things you would do is write a arbitration clause into your contract. You think that's reasonable approach?
Yeah, that's a good thing for lots of purposes.
So now, and another thing, you mentioned not everyone is going to be able to execute force and whatever, so you could contract for that as well. In fact, well, I've heard, I read the description of this in a book called The Market for Liberty, and they happen to call it a private defense association, a PDA. So you're okay with that as well, right?
Yeah, if the people in it only do things that they already had the right to do, like only use force for defense.
Well,
they don't pretend to have any new magical rights that other human beings don't. It's just like the plumber knows how to do plumbing, and he gets hired. He doesn't have magical rights. But government cops pretend to have rights. That we don't. But private defenders wouldn't.
Okay, a private defense association. Okay, and you also said if someone that a breach of contract can be the equivalent of theft, and and you can recover your property from a breach of contract, right? Okay, now I'm going to give you a situation that you would find to exist in such a system. Okay, you contract with a large corporation. All right, the contract is complicated and detailed, the way they often are now. Okay, you're not a lawyer. They say, don't worry about that. Here's what you're going to get, and they tell you, and they tell you what the bargain is, and in the contract, and they go, by the way, if anything happens wrong, here's an arbitration clause, and you can then, there's a way for us to force it, including it refers to the private defense association that ultimately would enforce it if necessary. Okay, now.
Okay.
You didn't understand that they fooled you in that contract. You didn't understand the language, or maybe they didn't. What they claim was going to happen isn't really happening. They've really breached the contract, not you. But because they put this arbitration system in all their contracts, that arbitration system, this is a big customer of theirs. They make a lot of money of. They want to please them. Their arbitrators are therefore biased. Therefore, they're going to rule in favor of the corporation. You have lost your life savings. You didn't understand the contract, so you didn't agree to anything. What you thought you agreed to is not what the contract says, but you didn't get that. So now that you claim, you try to protect your life savings, you go to an arbitration system, they rule against you. Now the Private Defense Association comes and takes all of your property. And that is entirely, not only is it permissible, it's predictable. It's entirely consistent with free market principles because, and you want to know why I know that, Larken? Because that's what happens right now. Okay?
I was just about to say that's what happens right now.
Well, no, but okay, but
with a gigantic government that steals on top of that.
No.
Can I tell you a couple differences?
I can tell you a couple. I can tell you a difference. Okay, that when that happened and the little people got hurt, okay, and they went and complained to you remember the scene in Godfather 2 where the woman comes to who's the young Godfather? It's the taxi guy. De Niro, okay.
De Niro.
So she says, this bad landlord, he's raised the rent, he's kicking me out because of the dog, this little dog. And, this is what would happen, okay, when large commercial companies would abuse consumers, they would tell the priest and they would tell the local political guy and on, and they would then get together and they would pass a law to make to ensure certain contract rights for consumers, because consumers don't have the lawyers, they don't have the sophistication, so they get protected from what they call unconscionable and one-sided contracts. So basically, as a group, as a societal group, they get together and now they have a bargaining power to put contract terms in to protect consumers that puts them on an even keel with the big corporations, which, by the way, don't go away. If you ended government tomorrow,
there's not really think that I am on the same level with the big corporations that just got billions of dollars handed to it by the parasitic government that stole it from the middle and lower classes, do you?
No, I think you would be a victim, Larken, not an oppressor. You would be an oppressed.
What am I now? What was the bailouts if it wasn't government stealing billions of dollars from normal people and giving it to the biggest corporations in the world?
Well, and it's assumed that it's okay. No one resists because government did it.
Listen, I did an entire video on that if you want to watch it. So anyway.
Okay.
That's actually Larken.
A couple assumptions in the example. First of all, I don't know anybody who's an anarchist who says nothing bad would ever happen. People can still do fraud. People can still do violence. People can still do theft. There's no magical guarantee that justice will be served in every case in any system or a lack of system. So you can totally point to like, what if somebody sneaks into your house at night and steals your stuff and runs away and you don't know who it was? Well, I'm poop out of luck. So one, I'm not pretending that without a state, justice always prevails. Yeehaw. Number two, that when you talk about the corporation doing these nasty things, there's, I could predict what might happen. I could suggest what I think would happen. First of all, in your example, the arbitration company that did that never gets another customer and they're finished.
You're absolutely 100% wrong about that, Larken. And that's not even a point of debate. Okay, those arbitrations.
Really? You think people would voluntarily go to an arbitration company if they had a choice, not a government forcing them to do it, that had been caught totally cooking the books and rigging something in favor of one side?
I think the muddiness is you don't find that out. Like you agree to the arbitrator in the initial contract. And then later you find out that arbitrator is rotten. So you don't have that information up front when you're making that contract.
Yeah, so I would get ripped off and that arbitration company is doomed.
They are.
Because everybody else in the future would say, I'm not going to them to arbitrate.
Why?
They're total crap.
Why would they not go?
Because they have a choice.
Wait a minute.
Every government court system, including yours, where you just said they won't have a choice. They will have to go to your government authoritarian court system, even if it's
wait a minute, Larry. Let's stick to your hypothetical, okay? You, Larken Rose, got ripped off by an arbitration system, right?
Right.
Now, because you, Larken Rose, got ripped off, everyone else in the territorial United States is not going to use that arbitration system. Tell me how that comes about. First of all,
anybody paying attention, have you ever heard of Consumer Reports?
No.
What do? They go out and say,
Larken,
we looked at this product, this one sucks, this one's
first of all, how does anybody else other than you know what happened in that arbitration?
Because I say what happened.
Oh, and how do you get that out there? Do you appear on CBS?
That's why I just said Consumer Reports. They make a lot of money telling people objectively what they think of certain products. And if they get caught taking $1 from somebody pushing a product, they're finished.